saw Chris at the polls the other day.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Hi there, Thomas.
Laura doing okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
Hi there.
Hello. Nobody else on the call yet, and no board members here in the room with me. So I'm gonna cut my mic and video here for a few minutes. If you're from the public joining this meeting in the future, thank you very much for participating. My name is Matt Lawless. I'm the Scottsville Town Administrator. This is the Scottsville Board of Architectural Review meeting for November 5th, 2020. The meeting will start at 7 o'clock. We're still assembling our quorum. So if you'd like to skip ahead on your video by 6 minutes now, that will get the kickoff on the meeting. But thank you very much for tuning in.
Hello.
Hey there. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Matt and Ron are there at Victory Hall, but he's just sort of gone dark waiting for everybody to show up.
All right. Good with me.
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to hear your voice.
Good to hear your voice. I go by your house quite often and I never see you, raking leaves or anything like that.
What are you getting at, Bob?
I guess, should I put the camera on? I don't know how to do that.
I don't have one here. Aaron calls in from time to time without one. It's not necessary if you don't want to bother with it.
Sorry, guys. Hey, Bob, Zach just saying hey.
Hey, Zach, how are you? I saw
Good.
Andrew the other day and he was singing your praises, I must say.
Oh, was he? That's kind.
Yeah, he was. No, and that's great. That's great. I didn't know that you were his chair.
Yes, I'm his department chair. That's right.
Well, I hope you'll make some exceptions for the poor boy.
Yeah, I'm a chair and friend. So
I know that. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, no, he's I try not to make too many exceptions for him. I like working with Andrew.
Yeah, and likewise, he told me we were at Peter's 5th birthday party.
Oh, cool. Is he's in school?
He's in, I want to say he's in kindergarten.
Yeah. Is he in the county now, or is he still Montessori?
No, he's still at Montessori, and I think next year, first grade, he'll go into a public school.
Okay.
I think that's the plan.
All right. How's Andrew doing, by the way? I know he had a.
Oh,
Leak.
yeah, he had a car accident.
Yeah.
He looks okay. He just had a Band-Aid on his temple.
Okay.
And I guess he's very lucky. I guess his car got totaled.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I was in touch with him a little bit that day, but didn't. He sort of he brushed it off a little bit. And he didn't seem too worried about it. So.
No, I think he's okay, but he was shook up. I think.
Yeah, for sure. Totally, I totaled the car once. It's no fun.
Yeah, he had a lot of glass in his, window glass in his face.
Yeah, that sucks.
That's scary. I didn't know anything about it till I saw him. Anyway,
I know he had
some good politics on tonight.
Oh, there's politics on tonight?
Oh my God!
If you care for it.
President is what? I don't know if I care for it.
Yeah.
I'm
24th. Go ahead.
I'm just saying. Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Hello, Aaron. It's Bob. I don't have my camera on.
How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. You look great.
Good. Thanks.
Of course, when people don't have their cameras on, one's inclined to think you're in the tub drinking scotch, but.
I love that idea.
Well,
who says you can't get good work done there?
Right.
That's true.
I'm going to do a drawing of myself in the tub drinking scotch.
There you go. That's the idea. I'll keep it. What is it? It's meeting time now, so I won't make any more comments about that.
Okay.
I think we'll still, if you don't mind, Zach, we'll wait until.
Tyler?
Well, I guess that's true. We're technically still waiting on a quorum, aren't we? Oh, there we go.
There he is. Hello, Tyler.
And Matt will log back on here shortly, I'm sure, with Ron.
All right. Should we wait for them to start formally?
We're technically recording, so I suppose if you want to save yourself a minute, we could move right along.
No, I don't need to save a minute. I can wait.
We get minutes from the previous
We
meeting?
did not. No, I'm
Okay.
sorry. That's on me. It's been a busy month with the Board of Supervisors meeting and some
That's okay.
personal and family health issues.
I wasn't sure if I missed it or not.
No, you missed nothing. I'll get that to you guys next month.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, thank you, Aaron, by the way, for putting me in touch with, or my mom in touch with Manuel. I passed that along to her, and they've already hooked up and gotten some work done. She's thrilled.
Great. So. He's fantastic. He, like I said, he doesn't speak a word of English, but he understands that you want it perfect. That's all that matters.
Well, and bless her, I don't think my mom has missed a day of her Duolingo since the pandemic started. So she's
really.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Oh, and here we go, Zach.
Hello.
Hi, Matt.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
We have a couple of guests and members of the public with behind me here, and let's see. Is Ms. Wilkinson going to join us a little bit later? I thought I saw that.
I don't recall seeing an email from her.
Yes, I have a note asking. I'm sorry. She disclosed an apparent conflict of interest with the new applicant, so she wanted to step back from that project, and she asked for a call once we were finished discussing that one.
Well, you might. Okay. Is the applicant for 620 Harrison Street on the call?
No.
Okay. What I'd like is the United Methodist Church here?
They are.
All right, so we're gonna in terms of like order of events, we're gonna take them first, and then we will take 620 Harrison Street. I would like to put them under new business, but I'd like Barbara here for these other things.
Sure. I will let her know that real quick, and then if she wants to excuse herself from one of the items later, she can. Let me also just introduce the folks who are around with me here now. For the benefit of the board, the public, and posterity, Mayor Ron Smith is with us to check in and share some greetings. Walter Neighbors to speak to current work ongoing. Mr. Taylor Schmidt to introduce himself and speak to his property briefly. And I'm sorry, George, tell me your name again.
George Hooper.
George Hooper, representing the Methodist Church.
I'm sorry, who's next to Mr. Neighbors? Hello, Mr. Neighbors. Who's next to Mr. Neighbors?
George Schmidt.
Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, Mr. Schmidt.
I have a question. If you have a fly or something, will we be able to see that?
I'll put it on camera and I can scan it and email it to you. Yep.
But my only question, Mr. Schmidt, I'm Zach Bullock, by the way. Nice to meet you. Where are you in the agenda? That's just all I'm trying to clarify.
I don't know.
And Mr. Schmidt might not know the answer to that question.
I don't know. He does not have a current application.
Okay, so can we, so let's, all right, so on our agenda, under new business, wait, we have, hi, we're all here. I'm calling us to order.
Yeah, there we go.
Hello, welcome to the November meeting of the Scottsville Architectural Review Board. I'm Zachary Bullock, member of Town Council and Chair. We have a quorum, so let's look at our agenda and make sure we're good with this. So under new business, we take applicants in the order that they are listed unless they are here. And so we have people here. So I want to talk with you all. So what we will do.
Zach, can I make a suggestion?
Please.
It sounds like some of our guests are not applicants, so perhaps it'd be best if we slide a public comment onto this agenda, as a new number 3 or something like that. And
well, Mr. Schmidt is here not with public comment, but to discuss a property, correct?
Yes, kind of. Just want to give you guys a heads up. I will be submitting an application in the near future.
Good. Yes, so that's why I want to.
Letting you know, I will be submitting an application in the next couple of weeks, and just wanted to introduce myself, give you guys a heads up, and that was basically it. That's all there really is to it. Just kind of let you know, give you forewarning that something will be coming down the pipeline. You can expect that.
Great. Then I would like to add you under new business. You are new business to us, Mr. Schmidt. So that's what we'll do. And then and then I think that and then 620 Harrison Street also needs to be under new business.
Yes, thank you.
And so what we will do, and Mr. Neighbors has a check-in for us about Canal Basin Warehouse. So I would like to suggest that we take Mr. Schmidt first, just introduce himself and his project, and we can introduce ourselves. And then we'll take our discussion with the United Methodist Church about their fencing COA. And then if we don't have the applicant here from 620 Harrison Street, we'll take Mr. Neighbors. And we'll do Harrison Street or Mr. Neighbors, depending on who is here. But since Mr. Neighbors is here first, I'm inclined to take him first. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Fine with me.
Okay, great. Then that will be our agenda this evening. Thank you all for coming. Minutes from October 1st. Thomas, we don't have any currently, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we will take that up at our next meeting. Old business. Our old business is really kind of repair, maintenance, and enforcement issues. So I think we'll take that up there. Does anyone have any other old business? No. Okay. That sounds good. So we will go here to our new business. Before we do that, though, I'd like for us all to go around as a board to introduce ourselves to the folks who are with us, some new, some returning. And then we'll do that first. I'm Zach Bullock. I'm on Town Council, and I am the chair of the Architectural Review Board.
I'm Erin Root, and I'm the vice chair of the Architectural Review Board.
I'm Barbara Wilkinson, and I'm on the Architectural Review Board as well.
Tyler Lux, also on the Architectural Review Board.
Bob O'Halloran, I'm not on camera, I'm sorry to say, and I'm on the ARB, and I was on the council for 8 years.
Great, thank you. And so it's the ARB's tradition to take applicants who are present first, as I mentioned. So we'll do it in the order we just discussed. One other thing to know about how we operate, as far as our process goes, is this is an opportunity for us to discuss work that's happening with your properties in town. And so it's meant to be a dialogue and conversation. We have our own ordinance and guidelines here that we will use to discuss projects. But I want to remind the ARB and applicants tonight that there's no expectation that we have to come to a conclusion tonight. So if the ARB feels that we need more time to discuss and deliberate a project, that is the purview of the ARB to decide. I would like, however, a member of the ARB to make a motion at some point in our discussion if we want to table something or pause the conversation and then come up with a plan for coming to a decision. But I want to make sure that everybody's clear that as we discuss projects tonight, if enough questions come up or considerations need to be given more thought, it's our purview to delay a final decision until a further meeting. And I think that's a responsible thing for us to do as we try to come up with quality design and plans for properties. But thank you all for being here. I'm really glad you're all here to talk about your projects. So Mr. Schmidt.
Good evening, I'm Taylor Schmidt. So I recently purchased the Masonic building right in the corner of Main Valley Street, and kind of going through trying to just get things repaired at the moment because there's a lot of damage. So the one I wanted to talk to you about tonight was spoke with the Pella Windows representative about fixing up windows on the building, which are falling apart and watertight. So I think I have figured out more or less where we're going to go with that based on his recommendations. So I'll be submitting a application next week or two probably to update the windows on the second floor of that building, which are the windows that are currently the problematic ones. So that's pretty much it. I mean, there will be more issues with that building, I'm sure, in the future, but my focus right now is just getting it weather tight and fixing any major outstanding issues before we get into winter and the weather gets bad. The longer term project that Masons are currently using the upstairs through summer, so limited things, but that's first on my agenda as far as getting things taken care of. And that's I'll be submitting one. That's going to help me with application, make sure it looks okay before I see over to the side. That's about it.
Sounds good. I'll send you the guidelines that this board has adopted. We have an ordinance, but there's also some more plain language and lots of pictures guidelines. And there's a section on windows in there, but we'll look for that application next month.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm getting a little background noise or typing on someone's mic. You are.
Oh, that was probably me.
Okay.
Typing notes next to Taylor.
All right, just FYI.
Be careful with that.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. I look forward to reviewing your project. Nice, cool. All right, so let's we'll take the United Methodist Church and make sure everybody has their COA handy.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
I guess, Matt, if you want to set this up a little bit for us. So we've got this project was done in the summer, but a COA was not submitted for it. And so we're looking at reviewing the current fence. And it sounds like what plan we want to go forward with in terms of approving a plan for making sure it fits our design guidelines for fencing in town. Aaron sent some information that we're going to use in our next item tonight in terms of discussing fencing guidelines in general. And so as I mentioned in an email earlier this week, if you want to delay decisions about what you want to do with this particular COA until after we've discussed fencing more broadly, I think that's totally appropriate. So if you can walk us through your COA and your design thoughts, and then we'll get some feedback from members of the board.
Okay. That's right. So the fence was constructed earlier this year on sort of a terraced hillside between Main Street and Jackson Street outside the Scottsville United Methodist Church. The intent of the fence was related to the new daycare center there. The kids had been crossing Main and Valley Street to go to the playground, and they had some safety issues with that. So the church wanted to establish a play area for the kids on site with some security. So the fence was related to that. I did not know about the fence before it was constructed and spoke to some of the trustees on site when they were doing maintenance there in the summer. I explained the regulations to them, sent them a notice of violation and asked for the COA. So that is now in, and that's fine. They don't propose any changes to the design and construction of the fence. They want to keep it the way it is. But in the COA, they propose a couple of stain proposals, couple different shades of brown stain that they'd like to put on it. So relevant to our discussion later, is the style of the fence okay, or do we want to advise any construction changes? And to the question of finish or paint, how do you want to approach that? So I'll yield, sir. This is what I got in the mail, and by all means, tell us a little bit more about it.
Okay, as I stated earlier, I'm George Hooper. I'm a trustee at the church. I'm sitting in for the chair that was supposed to be here tonight to represent the church, so I am somewhat familiar with what has happened and what we would like to do to get this completed. As Matt stated, at this point, we have no interest in redesigning what's already currently been erected back in the summer. Our proposal, I think, if I'm picking up on this correctly, is we want to use a semi-transparent stain because we were informed that we needed to stain the pressure-treated wood rather than let it naturally age to a silver gray color. So that's kind of where we're at, and I'm probably capable of fielding any questions that you may have.
Okay, so I'll open it to members of the board at this time if you have comments or questions.
I guess I'd like to know a little bit more information on how the design was informed, or what sort of design, why did you make the decision to design it the way that you did, or choose the type of fencing that you did?
I thought I was going to be able to field any questions. I was not part of that decision making at the time it was planned, as far as using the pressure treated wood and the I think it's some type of a wire mesh fence. All I can tell you, the intent was to be able to contain the preschool children up there on the hillside, so we didn't have to be concerned about them falling over that steep embankment, and then also to just have them contained within there so that they can be supervised properly.
So either, I guess I'd like to ask, maybe Matt knows this, what are our options in responding to this? Is it solely based on the stain? Is it, what sort of options do we have to respond?
Well, it was built without permission. So if you were to find it in violation and order a change to the construction, you could do that, and then the applicant would have appeals recourse to Town Council, Board of Zoning Appeals, and Circuit Court. And I told the applicant that at the beginning. So sure, you have sort of a first question of, do you think their application is sufficient, and or do you want to kind of go back a step to the enforcement part of it? And I don't have a strong recommendation on that, partly because of the lack of clarity in our guidelines.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my other question would be, I think the trim on the church is white, is that correct?
Yes.
So would there be option in discussing painting it white as opposed to staining it?
We strongly would object to painting it white from a standpoint of it's going to be very obvious going across that embankment, and I think it would blend into the decor of the landscaping much better if it were a natural color.
Okay, thanks for that response.
Yeah, that's the site.
And as you can see in the picture, it's not connected to the church.
It is, its placement is between two relatively historic buildings, and it certainly sits right in front of Jackson Street, which is, again, a very significant architectural array of houses. So consideration for its appearance and its appropriateness is something that I would hope that you and your fellow trustees would understand is a consideration for us. And we are just beginning to see a rash of new fences popping up without requests for a certificate of appropriateness. So that's why it comes to our attention in a sort of a different way tonight. And I like the fact, in the plus side, I like the fact that it's transparent, that you're using the wire so you can see through and you're not creating a big barrier and a solid wall. To Aaron's point about the trim being white, on the church, you know, there's white board stain as well as paint. I can understand that painting just for upkeep is something of an annoyance and an expense. But I'm not sure that the dark browns that are recommended as stains are necessarily the best choice. And I would just differ with you in your assessment of what would work well with the immediate surroundings. But that's a discussion, I think, among us on the board. If you all agree or disagree, I don't know. Aaron, you raised the point, and I think it's a valid one.
Matt, if I could for a second, we're getting the echo there. If you could just mute. Sorry, go ahead, Tyler. No, not you, Tyler. Sorry, Matt's getting the echo. We're getting it from the town hall there. Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and just, you know, I don't know when this, I just was trying to go on Google Maps just to take a view of what the property looks like, just familiarize myself real quick. And, you know, on the side of the church where the fence, you know, on that side of the church, there's already a substantial amount of untreated wood with from what I can see, 2 to 3 different styles of fences already. You kind of have a 4-foot fence that shields a staircase, and then up next to the building, there's a somewhat, more transparent picket fence, and then there's what appears to be a disabled access rail that's, white. So there's a lot going on already, and I think some consistency is important. I think adding an element of a different color stain, it's not necessarily something that I think is consistent with anything else on the property, is a bit of a challenge for me. I think I would lean more towards either, having it white or a stain of white of some fashion. But, again, it may be more of a conversation that we need to table. Just because, in reality, there are already 2 different styles of fences on the property, and with the intent of, having it be primarily used for children, just looking at the bottom of the fence is completely exposed wire. And I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and, that certainly something they could get their hands underneath, and wouldn't necessarily be a fun experience for the children or the people looking after them. So, it's just something that, I think I've got more questions about, just in terms of the intended use. Clearly it looks like it's a permanent fence, and it's going to be there to stay. So I want it to be something that, meets its purpose without any unintended consequences.
I would say, I just want to add in regards to the stain versus paint. I know that the woven wire is in the, considering fencing design guidelines, one of my thoughts was, there's a difference between fencing for livestock and for agricultural use, and fencing for residential use and within urban settings. I mean, we're certainly not very urban, but we are a town. And so we'd be referring more towards the kind of urban design. The woven wire fencing that was chosen is is typically an agricultural fencing. And if the wood is stained to still look like the sort of raw wood, I think that would refer even more towards that agricultural design. And so I think that's one reason to really consider painting it white, so that, if kept, it would look less like an agricultural fence and hopefully more like a residential design.
I'm just taking some notes here for myself, just to sort of recap some things I've heard. And so please correct me if I've missed something or misrepresented something. But it sounds like there is a preference, and none of this is decided yet. This is a summary. A preference for the color white, and referring here to what Aaron just said, to follow sort of residential or town design. That's what I'm hearing there. I'm also hearing from Tyler a desire for uniformity in responding just to the fencing that is already there. Is that right, Tyler?
Yep.
Okay. And then also on Tyler's comment, there's a question about material and sort of concern about sort of meeting purpose and design. Yeah. Have I missed have I missed anything else?
I think that was a pretty good summary, succinct.
Okay. think that's good for us to consider. I just want to clarify too, in alignment with, while our design guidelines do provide room for us to have conversation, I think that's important about appropriateness of things. The ordinance is clear that fences that are over 3.5 feet tall require a COA before construction. That's a clear standard in our ordinance. So in terms of, how we respond to projects that are done, I think that's important for us to keep in mind as well. Okay, so that's what I've summarized. So I think I guess I'd like to leave it to the board now. How would you like to proceed with this particular COA in terms of further discussion, decision making? But I want to leave that in your hands. How would you like to proceed with this?
I'd like to make a motion to table it.
Okay.
I would second that.
Okay. I would like us to come up with so that the church knows, though, I want them to have an expectation. So when they can plan to hear back from us, when would you feel comfortable coming up with a decision about this COA?
I think that we now have some material in hand that might help us revise our existing guidelines or clarify our existing guidelines. And that as we discuss that and go over it, the things that Matt sent, the things that Aaron sent, we'll be better positioned to provide a response, but that ought to be able to happen within the next month.
Okay.
By next meeting.
All right. So would it be reasonable for us to table this conversation, sort of close it here with our comments, pick it up at our next ARB meeting, and come to a determination about the COA at that time?
I think so, yes.
I'd agree to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we will plan to move this to, that'll be December. And so we'll add this under, I guess, old business for our next meeting. And our intention will be to take into consideration what we've heard tonight from the Methodist Church in terms of their desires and what they see as a need there with the fence. Your comments here tonight from the ARB, and then what we discussed tonight from what Aaron's providing us with regards to fencing in general, so that at the end of our December meeting, we can come to a determination about what we would like to do with this COA.
If I could, Zach, we are technically still in discussion on that motion.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we need a second and then a vote.
No, we have a second for Bob. We just need the vote.
Oh, great. So can I get a vote then from everyone? All in favor of this motion tabling until our next meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, great. So we'll move this to December. Thanks for joining us this evening. And we'll have sort of decision about how we'd like to move forward with the COA at our December meeting.
And I'll keep you posted on the discussion from tonight. So if there's any other prep that we can do in between, we'll do that. But as you saw, we need to work on the fencing guidelines. So even if you had come to me with a complete plan in advance, I don't know that I would have been able to give you much advice. So we're going to get that figured out here this month, and then we'll be able to work together better. Okay, so I appreciate your time, sir. Feel free to stick around if you'd like.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, George.
Good night. Good night.
All right. Mr. Neighbors is here.
Yeah, right.
Come on down, sir. The microphone's there. So just speak towards that.
If I have a handout, you said where to put it now?
I can scan it and email it to the group real quick.
You'll be able to see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Show you how old fashioned I am. I'm bringing handouts and it's all done a different way. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the way things are arranged. I had nightmares about meeting everybody in a room here. And so I said, well, gee, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. But I'm quite impressed. The last time I was here, we all met in a room here together. So this is good. I appreciate it. One, yeah. Okay, one more. And this is.
Very good.
All right.
I will scan these documents right over to you. Just take it away. I'll be right back. I'll be right ahead.
I should wait.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we got you.
Okay.
How are you?
Fine, it's fine. Like I said, I'm impressed to be here. This is quite a difference from the last time I was here. Everybody in the room, so this is great. We're running into just a slight little problem at our warehouse, but it's not something that would stop our project. We got some windows that are broken out, but we don't want to put the new ones in until we get that problem sort of arrested. And if you look at some of the handouts that Matt is going to pass to you, it came down to talk with the police department, and I came down to talk to a few of the newspaper guys, and they're all out of business. So I don't know what to do with that part. We want to maybe follow the task to counterbalance the minor damage to windows. Is that one on first?
Yes, I'm going to send this to them right now.
No, okay. We'll talk about that one first.
So this is 3 pages, a note from Mr. Neighbors about some tasks to work on the windows in the building, and then a statement from the Scottsville Police and the Albemarle County Victim Witness Office related to a recent vandalism case. So thank you for sharing that with us, sir.
Okay.
So is this just out of curiosity, is this additional vandalism? Because I know previously you had vandalism to the windows. Is this in addition to?
Well, at first we had 6 that were broken, and just recently I was over looking at my truck, surveying the building, and I noticed 4 more broken. I don't know exactly when that happened, but it's not a great setback to us because we are not going to be replacing each little window pane again. We're making the whole frame again. It's easier for us that way. By the time we try to chip it all out, this and that, we can make a new frame, put new glass in, and put it in, and keep that frame right intact with some plastic over it to keep the air down while we are working December, January, and February, and March. We're working the cold months in the building. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Oh, okay. So we're not going to take those out, but all of a sudden one day the new ones will be right in because they're being made or already finished. But in the process of that, we're going to be, if you follow I'm having custom-made surveillance signs put up for 3 sides of the building. They are large signs, I think 17 by 20. They should be to me in the next few days. I'm down waiting for them now, but they didn't come this week. We did get the cameras. The next thing, Officer Burnett mentioned lamps, motion detector lamps. I thought it may be too abrasive to have them there going off and on, but he said if you shine them down, that they would do a good job. These are motion detectors. We'd like to put those on motion detector lamps for the entire building, shine to the lower level. Put them on like 4 corners. Okay, cameras to also the same 4 corners. We already have an alarm system, so we're going to try and tie things into that. Now, number 5 says continue to fabricate new windows, but not install until the vandalism is sort of arrested. At least we know that we've got to control that. I want to post a $500 reward, but BB's out of business and Smith is here. Hold on. I don't know how else we're going to do that. We usually put something like that in the newspaper. Just putting a sign over there, I don't know if that's going to help. So some input from that aspect would help us. those are the 6 things that I'm thinking that would help. I talked to Matt earlier, and I think it's not a good idea to, let's say, switch around. He said so too. So we're gonna stay with the windows and until we get that problem solved. So how can we come up with some, like, anything I can get to, any information you can help me with, I appreciate it. As far as those 6 tasks that we're talking about.
And it sounds, whoa. Okay, there we go. So it sounds like in the meantime, you're going to be working on these other 3 things: the brick replacement, repointing the grooves, and putting in doors. You're muted there, Matt.
Yeah, we thought about that, but it may distract from the goals that we're already setting into motion. So we're going to continue on those, but somehow in a few months' time, we may be ready to go into that next phase, and then that's when we'll talk about that. But for right now, we come right back to the windows, continue with those, even during the process of the cameras and all that, within the next 7 or 8 days should be off. So the only thing is, how do we offer $500 reward to somebody? I don't have a newspaper anymore. I've tried to entice them out of business, out back out of retirement for advertising, but that would be a wonderful method, unless somebody else knows something that we don't know.
Goodness. I don't know what to say about the reward or signs or anything, but and I guess this isn't necessarily under the purview of the ARB, but I am curious what the police officers are doing about the vandalism happening over and over again.
Well, this note is there, and you said that if we need to talk to him, fine. It's not a lot they really can do, I can imagine. Alarm has prevented a few break-ins. That kind of what people actually never had anyone to get inside the building, but they have tampered with doors and stuff like that. But the alarm always, scares that way. So we're just going to go to the next stage and get these cameras up there, which, like I say, has nothing to do with the process, but yet it has something to do with the atmosphere of what we're trying to do. We replace one thing and then we got to go back and replace it again.
Yeah.
So that's why we're saying we're going to leave the broken ones right there, and we already have the new ones, the replacements made to replace them. Once we feel safe, good. So then I put the new ones right now.
Yeah.
I think that that's reasonable because of the multiple attempts at vandalism. I think it's reasonable to, want to put motion detector lights and cameras and to deter. And then once you have, a certain percentage accomplished, then installing them.
Yeah, I also think that makes a lot of sense. And hopefully the cameras will be enough of a deterrent. I know it's very dark over there, so I think lighting that up will be helpful, which is also good too. It'll help light up Canal Basin Square. I think that whole area would benefit from some lighting over there. So I think that's good. And if the our local police department, drives through there and people see them over there, or if they park a car there occasionally, which is their want from time to time, I think that would be helpful. So I appreciate your efforts to do that, and I second Aaron's approval of sort of the process. So thank you.
So are the lights and signs something we need to be discussing amongst ourselves, or is that a COA or no?
If the signs are temporary, then we're good.
Do we know the size?
Yeah, well, you mentioned 17 by 20, Mr. Neighbors. I assume those were inches.
Oh, yes, we don't want to flash on the wall like that.
Yeah, the billboard trespassing sign approach. I like that. Yeah, okay. So if it's a 17 by 20 sign, do you intend for them to be permanent or temporary?
Well, I think, I really don't know at this point. We had this particular type of sign in front of the door before, and we had some cameras up there. We never had a problem.
Yeah.
It's because it's interesting because the restoration project, does take so long. So even temporary lighting could be there for years. And I would worry about, like, for example, on a construction site and having construction floodlights. If those became a permanent feature, I mean, they're temporary in nature. Eventually the project is completed, but they could be there all the time.
Well,
Yeah.
I toyed with that a lot because there's a neighbor behind us, and this is not somebody in front of, these lights off and on, the bird or something flies by at nighttime or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't really want to get into putting up lights, but the LEDs will take care of the camera themselves. But that's what the police officer said. He said once they have a problem like this at the Firestone.
The tower plant, yeah.
What's it called, Firestone?
Yes, the factory.
Factory. And he said once they put cameras up there and some lights, they took care of that. It's definitely youngsters because the plastic horns that we always use in the parade, Fourth of July parade, they were broken off too. So it's just the kids playing. It's not the work.
Well, I would say, since these things are temporary in nature, I don't think we need a COA. The size of the signs are appropriate. They're not billboard trespassing signs, so thank you. And since you'll be pointing the lights down, that will take care of, I think, any concern that I have personally about being too bright or being obstreperous in that way.
Well, that was our major concern, but Officer Burnett said that we have to put some lights out there. He said, because it is dark, so you travel over there, you can't stop building that. We want to keep it in the limelight there until we get it sold and stuff. We'll get it sold.
Do you have any idea of what you want, what the lights look like?
Well, not really. I know the cameras are black, but the lights probably would be the same. We just haven't picked them out yet because they're local. The cameras, I did order them, but I have not picked up the lights yet because on my way here this week, I came down to the address from. Lights were not in my program. Because I knew it would be a problem with some of the neighbors. I wouldn't want that to happen. But yes, we will be getting into that, and so now we'll have to deal with that. Maybe some color that won't shine through. I mean, not short as.
Yeah, I mean, that's my only comment, Zach, is just that, it's such a significant property and, beautiful property and architecturally stunning. I just think there should be some consideration. I know this, Mr. Neighbors, in terms of design and such that, I think it's something that we just want to be aware of. I don't know if it's in our purview. To Matt's point, it seems like this has the potential to be temporary, turns into permanent. So
yeah,
I don't know if we just want any old random floodlight put up on such a substantial property in the town.
Do we have guidelines for that kind of lighting?
We have guidelines for exterior lighting. I'm looking at them right now. Turns out it's right next to fences and sight walls. So page 6, getting a lot of action tonight. But it's for permanent stuff.
Okay.
So since we don't have guidelines for construction or temporary lighting.
Well, I do think that was it either Thomas or Matt suggested that this is a inherently long process, and so what do we consider permanent? What do we consider temporary? Yeah. And it sounds like they'll be up for a while because the process is long, but also because Mr. Neighbors, I assume, and the town would want to protect that building long term. So I see no reason why you need to put up temporary lighting or permanent lighting if you already have lighting up. So I almost think thinking long-term would be the way to go, and consider it permanent lighting. So you don't have to pay for new lighting in 2 years. But that does mean, you know, looking at the guidelines and considering, you know, how bright they are and what color they are and what shape they are and things like that. Just, sorry, I don't have it. Well, maybe I do have it in front of me, but Zach, does it talk about the brightness?
It talks about the intensity and color temperature of exterior lighting, that it should be considered. Broad illumination to provide security is actually a language in here, so a preference for broad illumination to provide security, but not distracting or glaring to pedestrians and motorists. It has some other, you know, comments in here about, you know, style and time period. From what I'm sort of hearing about this sort of being semi-permanent construction lighting, maybe sounds like I might be more interested in sort of the color temperature, broad cover, and downward facing, and maybe even the color, as Tyler mentioned, of the thing itself. So would it be worthwhile then for our December meeting? It sounds like we would like more discussion about this, and I'm inclined to agree, especially if we're looking at these things being up a little while. So even if we're not like considering them permanent, just what would we like to see on this building for potentially for a year or two? I think that would be worth us, you know, doing a COA for, even though it's not required, just so that we have, you know, some stake in the game, I guess.
So you want to go ahead with the signs as a temporary matter?
Signs and the cameras.
Yeah, the cameras, but be more careful picking out the light fixtures.
But could you give me some guidelines on that?
I will, and then we can work together on picking out a product, and we can bring that to the next meeting to add, because you already have a construction COA for your window repairs that's ongoing. So if we add lighting to that, that would be a modification you could do, and you can pick out light fixtures that have a little more quality to them than just you know, a construction floodlight on a motion sensor.
Exactly.
Right.
So the motion, would the motion be okay as well?
I think the motion sensor makes sense. You wouldn't want them on 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was a new idea. Like I said, I did not plan to put lights because it made sense to me to listen to that. So tomorrow, if I can get a chance to you have some pictures.
I'll have to do some homework too, but if we're gonna modify the permit that you have now, then they wouldn't be installed for a month.
Okay.
So we could take a little time to.
We'll have to get them up. Really like to try to
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I understand that because you have a problem now.
Yeah, well, we don't know really. You know, the kids may have grown already. Which we're thinking, because you know, that's nothing broken on
Get on.
the garage side, and they were open at the same time. And we hold off on the railroad side because that's easy to throw something to. But well, we have to think on that.
Okay, well, board, how do you feel about, you know, waiting a month versus the security value of putting fixtures in within a week or so?
Well, my thought was because I am concerned about the security of this building. You know, once vandalism starts showing up, people think it's a target for more. So I would be inclined to meet sooner rather than our 1 month meeting out, if people are amenable to like having a meeting 2 weeks out or something like that, just to keep this moving quicker, so that Mr. Neighbors can get these things in place, and maybe at a sooner meeting review both the signs and the lighting, so that we sort of have a sense of what all of that will look like and then they can get it up.
If I could just make a suggestion, our requirement, I believe, for the body here is just to publicly notify of a meeting. We don't necessarily have to announce during this meeting when we're going to have our next one, if it's going to be off schedule.
Okay.
So if Matt and I were able to provide Mr. Neighbors with the appropriate guidance on what sort of shopping to do, we could reach back out to all of you as soon as Mr. Neighbors had selected something. And then the only requirement we would have would be to appropriately notify of the meeting on our website and, you know, Facebook and stuff, to say ARB will be having a meeting in a day or 2 or 3, whatever the requirement is. And we could do it that way without trying to pick a date right here and now of a week or 2 weeks. That might let us respond a little more quickly to however quickly Mr. Neighbors can do the shopping.
Okay. Does that sound okay to everybody?
I already have the cameras on the way, signs. It's just that I don't have the lights.
Okay. So we could.
Works for me.
We could help you with that, and then have a short call as a group to confirm a decision.
I can bring them to you and you can present them. Pictures of the.
I think that would be fine. If you wouldn't have to be here necessarily.
Okay. Well, okay. I think that was the main thing. Yeah, it's. I'm going to say it's not a short-term thing. It needs to be there for a while because we're not working with a full crew or anything on that. My brother John is the only one that knows how to perfectly do those numbers. Whoever he gets is tough. He is the only one that knows. So it's going to be a long work. But we're working on it.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll be waiting, I guess, just stay by your cell phones. Like an emergency, it's like bat phone, ARB phone. And we'll get together then in short order so that we can get this moving and we all sort of have eyes on what it looks like. But thank you very much, Mr. Neighbors. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you being here tonight and getting moving on this. Thank you.
I like the heat system there. The radiator.
Oh, the radiator? This
Oh,
thing. Yeah.
That's real heat.
That is real heat.
Yeah, real heat. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, sir. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
I'm so well impressed with it. We have to fix the whole room.
We're doing okay.
So
I'll keep in touch.
No idea what to do with the $500. We can do that, but that's enough.
We'll do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Oh, I got to make a note for myself. Hold on a second. All right. So thank you all for your consideration of things tonight so far. So this brings us to our fencing discussion of the evening, which I think will be nice to discuss in light of the COA that is before us from the church. So if you don't have them pulled up, it might be helpful to have the fencing guidelines in the design guidelines, which is, I don't know, section 4 or chapter 4. And then on the last page, page 6, there's a paragraph about fences. We know that if any fence over 3.5 feet requires a COA. And the guidelines here deal with style of home, but also has a lot to do with comparable buildings and, quote, looking around the neighborhood. So this leaves a lot at our discretion, I think, and homeowners in terms of design, without a lot of clarity. And I also have Aaron's email pulled up with a few links to check out. So it would be helpful for us tonight to, I don't know, maybe come up with some guiding principles for what we want to think about when we think about fences. And Thomas, in your minutes, it might be good if you could also distill for us what the highlights are that we want to make sure we come back to.
Sure.
And then I don't know about updating the design guidelines themselves, but at least if we have that record in the minutes, we can print that out for ourselves and keep them around for reference. Aaron, I will turn it over to you just to walk through what you shared with us and to highlight the things that you think are the most helpful in our fencing discussion.
Sure, yeah, and also Matt sent a couple of links for other towns and their fencing guidelines. And they have some nice diagrams and drawings that I think are helpful, that would be helpful in our guidelines too.
Okay.
So, you know, in doing this, it became pretty apparent to me that we really need to consider fencing in relation to the time period of the structure that it's surrounding and the immediate structures on either side and across the street. Which, I mean, I think we can all agree that fencing is getting a little out of control in Scottsville right now. And that, you know, at this point, you know, people can start saying, well, you know, that modern fence is across the street. So, you know, can I do something like that? But I think we really need to take a step back and consider time period of the house and the building, and what kind of fence would be built at that time. Another consideration that I mentioned in the conversation regarding the church is that I really think, you know, yes, woven wire fencing is you know, it may be historically accurate in agricultural fencing, but it's not in urban or town fencing or residential fencing.
Right.
And so I think being really clear about, you know, what kind of site is this and how dense is it and what is the objective of the fence is something to really consider. I think, you know, in thinking about guiding principles, there's the time period and then there's the style of the building. So as I wrote in my email, I embarrassingly didn't know about this resource that the Scottsville Museum has, where there are, you know, the prominent structures within Scottsville and the year that they were built or renovated. And I think that's a valuable resource, not only for for owners of the buildings, but also to look at precedents of fences in those photographs. So, you know, a lot of these photos do have fencing in them, and I think that's a valuable resource.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be the two really driving principles I would like us to be considering.
Okay, so it sounds like, so can you summarize them for Thomas, just so we got them in the minutes?
Yeah, essentially considering the time period and the style of the structure that the fence would be relating to directly.
Yeah.
And considering, is this agricultural fencing, or is it, what is the objective of the fencing? And I mean, I guess you could argue that if you're keeping children in, it's the same thing as keeping animals in. But I think, as Tyler mentioned, you know, that fencing isn't necessarily safe for children. And so, you know, what is the objective of the fence, and considering, you know, agricultural use and or residential use.
Okay.
Zach, it's Bob.
Uh-huh.
Could I just put 2 cents in? Because when I'm on my porch looking at the river and the trains go by, I'm obviously looking at that fence.
Yeah.
And I will say that the church did give me the courtesy of telling me they were going to put up a fence. and I had a sketch of it, and I didn't really give it too much thought, although of course I didn't like the idea of a fence at all. But you know, if it's keeping children safe, then of course I changed my mind and went, okay, well, if that's the way it is, it is. But when you see an agricultural fence, and you know, and I go out there and read, as you've seen as you go by, it's quite upsetting, the type of fence, to me. And that's why I kind of kept pretty silent while George was there, because I do know George and I like George, but I thought, you know, if we had more conversation about that fence and any other fence in the town, I think it would be really valuable.
Yeah.
And I would certainly, again, thank them for their courtesy, but I really kind of don't thank them for that fence.
Yeah.
I would like to just also interject, Zach, if I may. The information, both Aaron, you know, the information that you sent about context, I thought that was really helpful. In the links that you sent, Matt, about, I looked specifically at Middleburg and the language that they use. And what resonated with me was the specificity of that language, because I think you're right, Zach. There's a lot of room, there's a lot of latitude and a lot of discretion. I think in this sort of a scenario where we're seeing all these solid fences going up, I think that it behooves us to be more specific, to be honest with you. And so if you get a chance, I didn't look at Roanoke and I didn't look at Alexandria, only because they're larger, more metropolitan areas, but Middleburg is more, you know, of a town, historic, several structures that are a lot like ours. And I'll just give you, I'm not gonna read all of this to you and bore you to death, but I thought it was helpful because it talks about things like, you know, it says, modern wood stockade fencing, unpainted redwood, rough cedar, and unfinished concrete block generally is not appropriate in a historic area. That solid fencing, when it is erected to screen for like deliveries or, you know, unattractive HVAC pieces and that kind of thing, is one thing. But to put up solid wood and to obscure historic structures is generally not thought to be consistent with maintaining and preserving a historic atmosphere. It got very specific in saying, you know, basically not synthetic materials like fiberglass, poured concrete, etc., are not good. Metal chain link fences aren't particularly appropriate. If there's going to be wood, it should be painted or stained, not left, you know, untreated raw. And it says, where possible, existing wood picket or wrought iron fencing should be preserved. Again, let's try to be consistent with what was there, you know. I just really liked the idea that they got very specific with language that helps people, that sort of guides people on, you know, what may or may not be appropriate.
And in this particular, which email was this in, this source in, Barbara?
So when Matt sent the email that said, let me give you some more references,
yeah,
there was a link to Roanoke, Middleburg, and Alexandria. And I only zeroed in on Middleburg. And on page 45 of the 60-page document that is in the attachment, they talk about details and specifics around fencing.
right.
It's
yes.
really pretty extensive.
Yeah.
It says, you know, a 4-foot solid wood fence should be landscaped with evergreen shrubs to soften their appearance, especially when they are, you know, visible from the street. They talk about stockade fences as a backyard fence or a side yard that's not visible as being, you know, more appropriate. And they
Right.
also they speak to the transparency issue, which is really, one and the same as talking about not liking the idea of the 5 or 6 foot stockade solid fence.
Yeah.
It
And
says,
that
I'm
and that
sorry.
last bit sort of goes also to what Aaron was saying in terms of the objective of the fence. I just honed in on backyard
Right.
versus front yard. I think that's important. Thank you. That's helpful to think as well.
I just think that if we're talking about trying to put language together
Yeah.
for this,
Mhm.
having a template like this, we can agree or disagree on, some of these various aspects of it, but why reinvent the wheel,
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds to me as we're going here, like I would personally like to update these guidelines with some of this more specific language, even if we just kind of lift it and then cite this source. I mean, I'm very comfortable with that. And so I feel like we have like a two-pronged conversation. One, let's get some better language in here. And number two, how do we want to approach these COAs that are coming down the pike here?
To the first point there, Zach, if you guys decide that that is what you want to do and you'd like to just undertake adopting new language here, what you just described is something that Matt and I have done in similar processes for the Planning Commission of just kind of finding a suitable template. And as you said, Barbara, just not reinventing the wheel. If you guys feel like Middleburg, of the options that Matt or any other option out there, but of what you've seen, is the best one to sort of start that process from, then that's absolutely something that Matt and I could get rolling on.
I think that would be great. My only question would be, is Middleburg, without looking in detail at the specific time period and styles, is Middleburg, was it built around the same time as Scottsville, or is that something that we would need to change?
I think the time periods are pretty close. It's a wealthier community, so I think there's some differences in materials and precedents just because of that. It's a little closer to the Blue Ridge and the Shenandoah Valley, so you see more stone walls and fences there. But I think their historic inventory matches us really well.
And it is a pretty good comparison in some other ways. As Matt said, Loudoun County, Northern Virginia, it is a bit wealthier, but it's about 600 people. It's based on State Route 50, just like we're on State Route 20. And yeah, it's another 18th century Virginia town.
Okay. I
would agree that going down this route would be very helpful.
Okay, do you guys think you could have something mocked up for us for December?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. That sounds really good. I also appreciate the historic examples, if you mock something up and can insert some pictures, because the guidelines do have pictures and they have like a couple fences, but they're only like wrought iron. But the nice pictures from the museum is that they're wood, and I think just looking at that document sort of turned my head a little bit about this fencing conversation. What did fences look like in town? So
the museum examples are mostly low white picket fences, which is it's a strong precedent. It's not everybody's favorite fence, but it's clear in those pictures there were lots of them in the past.
Yeah.
Right. And even in the Middleburg information, it talks about the fact it's sort of like when in doubt, the picket fence is almost always appropriate because it spanned such a long period. Apparently the metal and wrought iron fencing didn't come into popularity so much until the latter part of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. And of course you see it around cemeteries a lot. So that's kind of a more Victorian approach, but it was, it was helpful. And there's also a book that I got from the little library at the museum that's called Old Virginia Houses. And it breaks it down into different counties. And there were a few, it's not all about, big grand structures and, you know, the really old houses. It's also about, you know, much more modest, little later in the 19th century houses where they've got even their porching and how the fencing is, or how the railing on porches is done. So it's, you know, it's helpful to have these different resources for sure, because, you know, they can give us the guidance. But you're right, Zach, I think to have some illustrations or photographs is really helpful too.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question. If somebody says, well, I want a privacy fence, what's the response to that? Is it, you know, use hedges or evergreens as privacy, or
Yeah.
because all of these are pretty porous.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think that goes back to the front yard, backyard delineation, which, you know, the fence I think we saw last month, you know, that privacy fence, dog ear fence, is backyard and is pretty private anyways, but that's kind of how I think I would interpret that, Aaron.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the use is important, and even the fence that we approved the last time, it's not really like a privacy fence. You know, like when I hear privacy fence, I hear like 6 or 7 feet. You know, the thing we approved was, you know, 3.5 to 4.
No,
it's 6 feet.
it was 6 feet.
That's 6 feet tall?
it
Yes.
is. Yeah, that was what they stocked. He said he wanted 5, but they only stocked 6, and to get 5, it was going to be more expensive.
Huh. I'm taller than I think I am.
And that brings me back to the other structure that put up a fence that doesn't have a COA, 385 Harrison. Where are we on that?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because I think we need your opinions on, since another fence was put up without a COA, and actually there's a second one too, down here by the bus depot, sort of a more agricultural looking fence was put up there. That was at 488. And I'm not sure who put that fence up, but I feel like myself that we should do our due diligence. If we're going back at this one, that we should look at the other two in a similar kind of way.
Okay. Sure. So.
Well, I want the board's thought. I want to make sure that, like, we're good as a body doing that.
I think that I think I think if we're going to respond to one, I think we're required to respond to all of them. I think we're talking about Clayton's house. I'm not sure what the address is there, but I do wonder about that. Like, I know that they put up a 6-foot fence, and that could be, that's sort of a blurry boundary between backyard and front yard. And so, you know, I think we need to consider what's our response to that as far as, you know, what's backyard and what's front yard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's really 3 fence styles there too, which is another aspect to the lack of putting in a COA, or, you know, having discussion around 3 fence styles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of which was the original, which is bordering the front yard. Then there's 2 different forms of wooden on the side yard. So you're really looking at 3 entirely different kinds of fencing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, and in a very shallow front yard setback,
Right.
which is very visible.
Yeah,
But,
I think.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
mean,
go ahead, Tyler.
no, that's fine. That's my only commentary. I think Aaron's absolutely correct that we need to address everything and not a single one.
Yeah, I think the other trick for us, because these are sort of retroactive COAs, is how much we want to require, if anything, property owners to do who have done the work. Now, I do want to say that, like, since we did it without a COA, it is totally, and I'm totally comfortable asking them to do it over. I'm entirely comfortable with this body making that decision, and and asking for that to happen.
And that's entirely legal.
Right. And then if they don't like it, they can appeal to town council or the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yes.
And this might be a good place too for us to flex our muscle a little bit as a board and say, hey, we do stuff, you know, and we're interested in doing it right. So I don't want us to feel like we shouldn't ask people to do things. On the flip side, I do think we have to consider like, well, what is there, and what is sort of a reasonable expectation for redoing work, if anything.
And there is a little bit of a two-step on that where it's less appropriate to make people comply with new rules that didn't exist when they did the work. So granting that the fence guidelines are vague now, but in both the cases that you mentioned, they built without getting the approval. In the Harrison Street example, that's on me for giving an exemption when perhaps I shouldn't have. I was using the part of ordinance for exempting it because it was generally hidden from public view and the fence was on the side and back of the lot. It certainly wound up being far more visible than I expected it to be, but town council can override my administrative decision. If you want to say I applied the wrong section there and a tall fence was more important than the generally hidden, and it turned out not to be generally hidden. So I take that.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of process, we already have on our agenda for December to more fully flesh out the fence, what we would like to see from the fencing COA at the church.
Yeah, real quick on that. What's our plan for further discussion?
Oh, I was thinking that at our next meeting, we would have a focused discussion just about that COA. And then
similar to what we were discussing, I don't know if anyone else feels comfortable, similar to what we were discussing about doing a special meeting in regards to the lighting. Would others feel it would be appropriate to have a similar announcement that we're going to discuss the Methodist church fence, just so we have an opportunity to discuss it amongst ourselves? Is there a forum to do that?
I think if you guys want to call an extra meeting for that, of course you're more than welcome to. Unlike the case with Mr. Neighbors where, there's a back and forth exchange with the applicant, we're getting him guidelines, we're waiting for him to make a decision to present to you guys. In this case, I think you guys could go, I don't see any reason why you couldn't go ahead and schedule that tonight, find a time that suits all of you now, because you're not waiting on anything from the Methodist Church necessarily to proceed with your discussion.
Well, I think that this is an unusual situation in that, yes, people knew, or people should have known, that there was a requirement to submit a COA if they were going to do a fence. And they either did and it got accepted without the regular due process in the ARB, or they went ahead and did something anyway without ever talking to us at all. And, and now are pretty much saying they're not interested in making any changes unless it's just to paint or stain. So we've got that, and then simultaneously we've got this issue of pretty vague language with regard to fencing. So I see it as a bit of a conundrum for us, and one that's a little hard to necessarily defend all the way unless we're able to give some sort of guidance, specific guidance back to the people. If we just now say, sorry, it's got to come down, it doesn't comply, then we absolutely have to come together on what the new language and guidelines and specificity is, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can just say it's bad, it's good, it's okay without being a little more concrete or giving them something to react to. I'd be interested, Aaron, from your standpoint, about the recommendation that if somebody's going to already invested in a hard board fence, you know, saying, all right, rather than tearing it down and putting up some other fence, you need to do some landscaping, some soft landscaping that keeps this from being, you know, the Great Wall. And, you know, so there's that piece of it.
Mhm.
You know,
Rather than looking like a, you know, horse paddock.
right. And so, you know, I think we need a work session where we can sit down and say, do we include this or do we not? Do we include this? Do we not? And then in terms of procedurally, how we go about approaching these folks, yeah, it's going to be interesting because they have been walking around seeing other houses in and around Scottsville that have done their own thing. And it makes it makes it very hard for us to achieve the kind of credibility that we, you know, hope to have. I'm thinking again about the house behind the laundromat, which is still technically the historic overlay district, that has also one of those really high stockade fences that just kind of sprang up. And you know, if we're going to talk to everybody, do we talk to them too? Or do we, you know, start a campaign that says, look, we see a lot of things that have happened without participation in the process as it's designed and communicated. We're working to refine further the guidelines for people. But in the meantime, people should not look to add fences or walls without coming to town hall, getting a COA, and getting it approved or disapproved.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because there are a lot of them out there between Clayton, the Methodist Church, the one down by the laundromat. I mean, even the house on Harrison, where they ended up putting up a concrete wall. Now a cinder block wall. They did cover it with stucco. It's not unattractive, but they did it without a COA.
Mm-hmm.
So can we have a work session that isn't a recorded, everybody's open to come to the meeting in the community? Or can we just thrash things out?
The meetings have to be public, but right, the door has to be unlocked down here, and I have to put up a flyer that says we're having a meeting. But if you want to have it at a you know, on a different schedule from this one, you know, in some way that feels more casual, so that you can do some brainstorming work about regulations and not invite any applicants because you don't have any applicant business on, that's okay.
Yeah, I'll just say the town council work sessions generally don't get a whole lot of public viewership in the way that the regular sessions do. There's not typically as much interest in watching the sausage get made.
Right.
And I think, you know, just as an observation, part of the problem that you guys are feeling, the pressure that you're feeling, is because we've had, you know, we identified the need to update these fencing guidelines a while ago, but have had a number of new fence applications since then. And as Matt said earlier, you know, there's a problem of enforcing new guidelines on old projects. So I think if Matt and I can get the new guidelines, you know, mocked up in a rough draft for you guys in short order, we at least have new guidelines to move forward with. And then it's just this matter of going back to old projects and trying to make sure that they match the old guidelines.
I think in relation to that, just answering your question, Barbara, I think, you know, it seems reasonable to me that we could say sort of retroactively, in order to soften this fence, you know, here are the suggestions. And I would say, you know, under those guidelines, we need to be really clear about, like, if your fence is, you know, this tall and non-porous and, you know, longer than 10 feet, then you need to add some kind of, you know, vegetative response that softens that. And, you know, I think too, and I think this is what you were talking about, Tyler, that could possibly be a response to the church. I don't necessarily, you know, think, well, I have my own opinions about the fence at the church that we can discuss in the work session, but I do think it could be an option for them
Mhm.
if we're interested in that response.
Yeah, I think I think these are all good comments. I have sort of two thoughts as I've been listening. One is, you know, I don't have a whole lot of empathy for folks who do projects without a COA in terms of like not applying quote unquote new guidelines. Because if they had brought this COA to us, we might have very well looked at our fencing guidelines and said, oh, you know what, we need more information before we can answer this question.
Mhm.
So I feel like, not the proof of burden, but you know, we can make them do something because we then learn stuff about what would make this design work.
Sure. No, I just mean strictly that we can't, you know, apply a law that we passed in, or an ordinance that we passed in 2021 to a project that was done in 2020.
If there was
Right,
no
well,
COA,
Well, none of this will be passing ordinances. I mean, we've already got the ordinance that says you need a COA if you have a fence over 3.5 feet. We're just talking about the guidelines for thinking about the design
I
concept.
suppose that's true.
So, so that's what we need to keep in. That's, you know, what we need to keep in mind here. And then second, sort of the process here, because it sounds like we want a work session to flesh out. Sounds like we need to flesh out guidelines for fencing, but we also need to flesh out how to respond to this particular fencing COA, because that's on our plate. Would it make sense to have a work session where we fleshed out guidelines with something mocked up by staff, and then we look at and approve and feel like we're ready to move forward with, and then discuss during our regular meeting the COA on the church, which we don't necessarily need to invite the applicant back for. I feel like we've done that. So my thought would be that in our December meeting, we put under old business or what have you, our discussion just about that COA to come to a decision.
That certainly works for me. I can provide the staff support to that and get us through those steps.
Seem to have lost Aaron and Bob.
I thought we had told, no, that makes sense. If you want to do it during the next meeting, I thought we had just told them by the next meet. I thought we said by the next meeting, we would have a decision for you.
Can we pause here for a second, guys? I think we've lost our quorum.
Yeah, we've lost some folks. Where'd they go?
That was strange that they both dropped at the same time.
Yeah.
No, Bob dropped like 5 minutes ahead of time.
I don't have any notes or anything from them. I don't know what happened.
Matt, do you have their numbers? I was looking around for my phone.
Yes, I can call them.
Yeah, give him a buzz.
Hey, Barbara, while we have a second here on pause, I had a question for you that I didn't get a chance to ask before the meeting. Lauren and I are thinking about a couple of projects that we'll put in front of the ARB for COA in the next couple of months. And I was just wondering if you might have a chance to come by over a weekend sometime and just kind of talk a little bit about some of these design thoughts before we get too far into the process.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Well, we are very free and around, so whatever works with your schedule, just shoot me an email or something and let me know. And
Sure, I have a board meeting this Saturday that'll be in the morning, but I should be able to do something either that afternoon or maybe Sunday. I could do.
Sure, yeah, either would be fine with us.
Okay. You know what? Email me your phone number, Thomas. I don't know that I have it.
Okay.
It just would be easier for me to give you a call if I could, or text you.
Absolutely, that works fine for me.
Sure.
Great, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Erin's home internet went out. She's going to call in just a minute.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
Can I just ask you all whether or not you feel like the direction of giving more specific language versus vaguer language is a good thing or not? Because I'm not sure. If that feels problematic, just please say so.
Oh, no, I think more specific language is helpful. I think one of the things we've sort of observed over the last year is that property owners want specifics. You know, when we do have conversations, like throw it back at them, they're always like, well, what do you want?
Tell me.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately when people come to us, they're like looking for expertise, you know, they're looking for answers. So I like specificity. I also appreciate in our guidelines the flexibility, you know. So
I hear you.
I think having some balance of, like, I do like language, like look around the neighborhood. Like for me, that really does feel like an organic way to develop, you know, a district too. So
unless that bites you because they've gone and they've seen it done the wrong way by somebody who didn't get a COA, and then they come and they say, well, I can tell that this is popular among everybody, and you kind of go,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think a balance of it, but I think leaning towards specificity is good, especially around the things we talked about tonight, like front yard, backyard, you know, those sorts of things, and how do we think about these spaces, you know, and the era
scale,
of
heights of fences. I think it's so important.
Yeah. I think
that feels very defensible. And if you're going to enforcement to say, you know, this is a justifiable rule and you want it fixed this way, then it's very clear if the corrective action has been taken or not.
Right.
Yep.
I definitely highlighted that as one of those guiding principles to be distilled here.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So three things. We have a quorum now. So it looks like we're talking about a work session to do fencing, to just talk about fencing, and get some guidelines straight. And then during our December meeting, revisiting specifically the COA at the church. And I think, Tyler, when I may have said have a decision by December, I think I meant by the end of our December meeting. I think those are the words I didn't say, but that was my thought. And so we've got those two meetings there. The other piece, to Barbara's point about a campaign, I think it would be worthwhile. I was thinking about this morning. Like last year, we sent out a flyer, you know, with information about the ARB. I think it'd be worthwhile doing it again, you know, just like to remind people you live in a historic district, and, you know, just to make that part of our regular, you know, standard operating procedure, especially since we're going to be doing an inventory and the things that come along with that. So does that sound like something that you guys could send out? I know our budget's tight, but I don't know what, you know.
I'd have to go back and look at what we spent on that last year before I comfortably said that we have the money for it.
It was only a couple hundred to do the postcard sized little mailings.
Okay.
All right.
Even on the Town of Scottsville website, would it not be appropriate to, you know, just have a little blurb about, if you're considering putting a fence up, if you're considering doing lighting changes, come to town hall and get a COA. Familiarize yourself with what you need to do. Something, just some language out there that the Facebook page for the town or whatever, in a way to heighten people's awareness, I guess, is the main thing.
Yep. And we could also do that on the mailer itself. I mean, you could just change like the wording on the front of the mailer. Want a fence? Think again. Or not, I don't know. But, you could include some language, adapt the flyer to emphasize fencing this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you guys could get back, either like send it out if you feel comfortable, because I do want to be sensitive to our town budget.
Yeah.
But I also think that part of what makes this group work is communication, and that is what we've been really good at getting better about. So I think it would be a worthwhile investment on our part.
Absolutely.
Okay. So do we want to set a date? So let's set a date then for a fencing work session. I'm looking at, so November, Thanksgiving comes very quickly, and then all of a sudden we're up on our next Thursday meeting. And I know between now and next week we have a council has a work session. There are more committee meetings this week, then a public session. And I know we just directed town staff to do a mock-up of fencing guidelines. So I don't really foresee us meeting before Thanksgiving.
Is Thanksgiving on the
26th.
26th.
Okay. So you don't think,
We could meet as early as maybe Monday the 23rd. I don't want to get too deep into that week. But does that sound workable on your end, Matt and Thomas?
I was just going to say, if the mock-up that we're providing is just Middleburg, I think could schedule this sooner if you guys want to just take the time between now and then to look at Middleburg's ordinance, and then we take that work session to all sit down together and dissect it, highlight the parts we like and we don't like. That might really give Matt and myself some more, meat to dig into in customizing it the way you guys want before you would adopt anything, at the end, next month's meeting or later.
Some of it could be by email, but yeah, I think we could support this time 2 weeks from now, if Thursday the 19th was okay.
Oh. Yeah.
And maybe do Walter's lighting decision at that time as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds good.
Feel good about the 19th? Okay.
Works for me.
so you want us to read Middleburg before then and highlight things?
Let's maybe try to get some back and forth on email with that. If any, Barbara mentioned some of the key phrases in that ordinance already. I'm going to try to cut it down because theirs is a lot longer than ours. But in the next 2 weeks to have a little back and forth about some of the important language and try to work on markup.
Well, I can tell you very specifically that the 60-page document, you can get to page 45. That's where they talk about fences. And everything running up to that is just, everything. So 45.
Thanks for the heads up, Barbara, because I was going to sit down and just be like slogging. Yeah, where's the fences in this document?
Right.
Okay. All right, so pro tip, start on page 45. Okay, so we'll do the 19th for a work session on fencing and maybe also discussing the neighbor's property. And then we'll have our regular meeting December 4th.
7 p.m. work for you for the work session?
Yeah. Yep. That sounds good. Thank you all. I really appreciate that. I feel good about this. Okay. Anything else on this before we continue through our agenda? All right. Where are we? Okay, so we are now into repair, maintenance, and enforcement issues. Dollar General follow-up. I got an email. Ron, I saw your email today, if you're still there, Ron, but if we could get, well, what's the status here with the Dollar General?
I haven't heard anything else from Mr. Ashley other than I didn't forward the document that Matt sent us to the general office because Mr. Ashley said he had done that. And I just haven't heard anything back from him.
Okay.
He's the regional manager.
Right.
He
Okay.
got it, he forwarded it to somebody.
Okay. So we're moving.
Sort of.
Sort of. People have it. Okay. Maybe we should follow up with them sometime.
Yeah, let me email him tomorrow and say, hey, I went to the ARB meeting. They were asking if I've heard anything. I haven't really. So what's going on?
Let's do that.
I did that at the beginning of this week,
Okay.
in advance of this meeting, because I saw his email. So if you think Monday is recent enough to touch that.
Yeah, if we don't hear anything by next Monday, I'll do it, and we'll start bombarding him every week.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That sounds good. Canal Basin Warehouse. We talked about Mr. Neighbors. I sent Matt an email just to find out who the property owner is, because I do feel like the Canal Basin Warehouse is weird because we're actually talking to the contractor and not the property owner. And I feel like it would be better for us to communicate some of these things with the property owner about the condition of the building, especially if the neighbors are walking off the project after a little bit.
They own it. They own it.
Oh, they own it?
Yeah.
Why was I under the impression that they didn't?
Oh, no.
The only person who can answer that question is me. Okay. So the neighbors' brothers own the building.
Yeah.
Got it. Done. Solid. Then we are talking to the owner. Thank you. Next item, residential guttering, the Tyler Lux special. Where are we with the 2/3 gutter on Valley Street?
I think it's done.
Really?
My wife told me it was done. I haven't even left
You
the,
want me to walk outside and see?
It's done. No, I saw it. They finished it.
Yeah.
Wow.
did they extend the downspouts?
Picky. I don't know.
Or are they planning to put porta potty size rain barrels underneath of them?
Yes, the downspout goes all the way to the ground.
Okay, good.
I sent a sanity check and looked at it this afternoon, and it looks fine.
Well, I'm so sad we won't be talking about this anymore.
I'm not.
Still talk about it if you want to.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sweet. Thanks, Tyler, I really got to thank you for keeping us honest about that one, because that was an easy thing to just forget about, but I really appreciate you being dogged about that. So,
Devil's in the details.
that's right. We're holding people accountable around here. Okay. Our inventory and historic property condition. I guess the only thing I was planning on talking about tonight regarding this is our plan for just doing the inventory, but maybe we should just move this discussion to later, because we're not going to be doing it before Thanksgiving. So.
Well, when did we did it? When did we do it last year?
I think we did it around, December. I feel like December might have been when we did it last
I was
year.
decorating my Christmas tree when you guys came up the steps.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So do we want to do it again in December? That's fine with me. We can work out the details at our next meeting. I don't think there's a whole lot to flesh out.
Let me try to combine that past listing information for you by then. I've started that. I found a bunch of the past inventory documents. Thank you, Thomas. And putting the findings together in sequence takes a long time, but I think it's going to be really informative to see how things have changed.
Or even, Matt, if you don't even get to cataloging historical, if we could at least begin this year with a spreadsheet, an Excel document that has every single address in it. That way we don't necessarily need to worry about cataloging. Let's not hamstring ourselves with data entry, but let's start fresh this year.
Yeah. I think it'd be helpful though to have at least last year's inventory in there as a starting point, so that we can at least compare the current inventory and then the one that we do this year.
Especially under the circumstances for this year, where a lot of what we cited last year, it hasn't had the proper follow-up. So which issues got better on their own and which ones have just gotten worse?
Mm-hmm.
That would be good to know.
Yeah.
Baseline.
Yeah. So if we can, all right. So you think you can have that for December as well? Okay. So let's table this then for December, and we'll look at an Excel document for doing our inventory in December, and then we'll make a more formal plan for expectations for when we want to have it done. All right. All right, so we're on to information items here. Review of active projects and enforcement issues, at least those we haven't discussed this evening, and then the certified local government application.
I don't have much else on active projects and enforcement. Sherry Lambert never popped up on this meeting, and I apologize to her for the late notice on that one. She did apply in good standing. I don't have any other new COAs in related to enforcement matters that we have talked about in the past. Mayor Smith had spoken with Jimmy Marshall, but I haven't talked to him recently. And the only other certified letter that I sent out was to the Kidd estate at 165 Hardware, because we had the concern about demolition there. And I got the confirmation on that certified mail, but no answer.
Okay. Where are we with the Marshall property in terms of the 90 days? Where are we doing that?
I would have to go back and look. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that on hand here either.
All right, so it would be good to follow through on that as we discussed previously with regards to enforcement. All right, so an update on that for December. And then what else I want to say? I had a thought. Oh yeah, 620 Harrison. So the applicant didn't show, but we have the COA, so we should plan for that also, to plan to discuss that in December as well. At least preliminarily. I don't think this is one that we will come to a decision about in December. But at least familiarize yourself with what is in that COA. And I think be prepared to, I think we should invite the applicant and at least have a discussion in December about what their plans are.
And I would need some help with this one, because it recommends an awful lot of black paint. And that wasn't ringing any bells for me for the historic paint guidelines that we do have. So maybe a little bit of historic homework on that, because
I did some research on that, Matt. I think the black is not necessarily uncommon on Greek Revival homes in terms of shutter colors that matches the door per se. It's not uncommon. However, there are other colors that have been suggested similarly to the green that's on the shutters now, or a darker shade of green that would be consistent. So I think it's just presenting a lot of change, to your point.
Sure. Okay. Well, that'll be helpful. And again, I appreciate all the documentation and the advance notice, but it does take some work to get ready for it.
Yeah, so let's be sure to invite the applicant to December. And I think, like we did tonight with the fence, I think it would be a good idea just to frame that as a conversation, to understand the project, provide some feedback, and then for us to take more time looking it over. The bus depot, did you hear anything from Mr. Lucas? Did you ever reach out to him by any chance?
I did. I think it was before or right around the October meeting that I spoke to him. And financial problems, but still
Yeah.
motivated and interested here. I had been expecting to get some more detail in writing from him, so I'm happy to follow up. Does want to keep moving, but didn't get the work done this summer that they expected to.
Yeah, and I bring it up just because I ran into him informally, like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. He was down here, and he expressed a lot of enthusiasm for the project. Still, financial problems, but was interested in finishing the retaining wall behind the property, doing that sort of early on. He mentioned something about still waiting on VDOT approval for his site plan, and so it's those items that I think would be good for us to hear about from him. Just as much as he knows, because I know the project is ongoing, but I think just for us, it would be good to check in with him. He also like really cares about what we think, just like in conversation. He always like wants to make sure he's like, does this look bad? Do I need to fix it right now? What do you want me to do about it? So he's like really, he really wants to do the right thing, which I really appreciate.
Did you have an opportunity to ask him about the window that's been bugging you?
You know, I haven't. That's my little thing, isn't it there? Yeah, so we need to reach out to him about that too, to get that sealed up.
That was your opportunity, Zach.
Well, I was bowled over by his charm and just enthusiasm for the project that I was like, oh no, actually I sell myself short. You know what I did say? I said that we were concerned about that window, and I pointed out some of the unsealed doors. So wrong. I sell myself short. I did in fact mention some issues, which he suggested he'd take care of. He hasn't. And anyway, it would be good. It would be good to get a check-in from Mr. Lucas. So
I think his charm is his strategy.
It's working. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so if you could reach out to him again and invite him to December, I'd like to hear an update about some of those things, even just like the procedural things, like where's the VDOT story going. I think it'd be good to know that. All right.
Do we know what the Masonic building is going to be used for? Is it
No,
going
that was all news to me. I don't know anything.
I think, I know Scottsville Supply is a very stable tenant, and no change there. I think long-term, there's an apartment conversion idea upstairs that the fraternal orders have generally experienced declining membership. So I think long-term an apartment change is what they would envision.
So just to be clear, so it's no longer owned by the fraternal order?
That's right. The building sold a few months ago, and Mr. Schmidt is the new single owner.
Huh. So they're just not, okay. Got it.
I believe they are still using it
Yes.
upstairs for the time being.
Okay.
I asked him how often the club had been meeting, and he said on occasion.
Yeah.
He goes in to check on it for repairs, and things have been moved since the last time he was in.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what he has to think about windows in that place. I didn't say much at the time, but I think that's another one that's going to take a little consideration too.
Yeah.
But especially not only because it's an older building, but because of how prominent it is in town too. So something to think about.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that should be fairly easy. Just recommendation of what's in our guidelines and preserving as much historical authenticity as we can.
Yeah. That's right. I think it's communicating that it'll be important so that he hears that. But that's exciting. That sounds like cool movement down there.
It's
All
great
right.
to check in with us.
For sure.
Yep.
All right. Any other informational items?
The certified local government updates. We did some work on that.
Oh yeah. What's the story there?
You want me to take that? Sure. So I had a nice conversation this afternoon with Audrey von Lindern, who runs that program. Our application is in pretty good state there are a couple of things that we need to be looking at down the road, some for immediate attention and some for future one. Basically, the way that this can work is when we submit our application, there are certain elements of it that the federal agency who approves these things will need to see in place in order to go forward. Pretty much everything else, we're on a probationary period for like 4 years where we can make changes and adopt new languages we need and all of that kind of stuff. So in the category of things we need to immediately take care of or else our application is not eligible, we need a conflict of interest statement in our guidelines and rules of procedure for how to handle COAs. A timely discussion here, isn't it? And then finally, a minimum attendance policy. And I don't yet have details on what they're going to be looking for on that, but that should be a pretty straightforward, the feds will say, it's this number out of this many meetings or something like that. And we would need to have that language in our guidelines. But those are the only 3 things that we need to do before we submit the application. There are other elements of it. For instance, I think, Aaron, we talked about this a little bit when you were coming on as our architect. The CLG program will require a licensed architect with the state to be serving as our architect at some point in the future. Your term, will run its full course uninterrupted there. And it sounds like maybe even there is some flexibility on that. When I was speaking with Audrey, she talked about, where was it, down in Southwest, Abingdon, that couldn't find architects anymore. She said pretty much everybody in the county had taken a turn on the board and no one was interested in doing it anymore. So they can be kind of flexible with smaller rural areas like us. But so what I'd like to do to keep this moving forward, and maybe actually that work session would be an interesting place to kind of include some of this. If we could, the conflict of interest statement is really straightforward and I can email that to you. That's a simple adoption. And Zach, what we might want to do at the work session with town council is just talk about how town council would like to see that change to the ARB guidelines happen, if they want to, government services to take a look at it and make a recommendation on it or what.
Okay.
But that's very straightforward language that we can take a template and just, change the names and adopt. The rules of procedure, I think, is going to be a little bit more interesting of a conversation. And again, I'm sure there are templates there that we can use. I don't have one in front of me, but Audrey said that she would be able to get one for me. But definitely that's something that I think we'd want to tailor a little bit more to how you guys like to see the process run and what you'd like to see done. But essentially it's something that's missing. We have, bylaws that govern how the board is set up. The bylaws say that we should establish procedures for how to handle these applications, but we don't have those. As far as Matt and I have been able to find that wasn't done. So it's something that we would need to have in place in order for the CLG application to move forward. And probably just a good thing to have in place anyway.
Yeah, I'd say so. I like a procedure. If you can, if you like, it would be nice to see a model of that.
Yeah, I'll keep working with Audrey and try to get that for you. And maybe, what did we say, the 19th for that work session? I'm sure we can get a conflict of interest statement and rules of procedures templates out for you guys to review before then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to load up that 19th meeting too much.
Well, that's true too, right? That was supposed to be a light one.
Well, I mean, I think fencing will keep us busy. So I think if we just keep that work session focused on the fencing guidelines, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
And there's no I want to keep this certified local government thing moving forward, but if it has to move into January or something to talk about procedures in particular, because I think we should take some time thinking about that.
Agreed.
And I know we have like some important COAs in our December meeting. I think January might be a better time to think about looking at the procedural stuff.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. I will, but we definitely can get the conflict of interest stuff moving at the work session. That's for sure.
Which is relevant, and again, Barbara, for the record, thank you for disclosing. It didn't come up, but that's exactly, you want some guidance around things like that, so that it's not just a gut feeling. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
And then the attendance policy too, that again should be fairly boilerplate. You know, the federal agency here is going to have a minimum guideline that they're going to be looking to make sure we meet. And it'll just be something that says, you know, don't miss X number of meetings in a row or X number of meetings out of so many. And yeah, that and the conflicts of interest, we should just be able to put right in place.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that, Thomas.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, and sorry again, you know, we started that discussion now almost a year ago. And, this was one of those things that fell to the wayside with the state of emergency. So I apologize for the long delay in picking this up again, but.
Not at all. I mean, I think it might have even started before that. And I think I didn't like it because it had like required expansion of it. Because we had talked about doing it and then decided not to because of the language about expanding the historic overlay district that seemed to be embedded in it. And,
I think what that is, I'm looking at the checklist here. It wants to make sure that we have the ability to do that, but not necessarily saying that we need to. It asks, I'm looking for it in here, including, yes, does our ordinance include criteria for the establishment of historic zoning to designate and protect areas with multiple properties, individual structures, architectural? No, that's not the one. Oh yeah, set out procedure for establishing historic districts that allows the review board to make proposals for additional historic districts. Yeah, so there's a lot in here about that kind of stuff, and you guys are all in good shape. You can expand if you want, and you have chosen not to, but I don't believe that this will require anything.
Maybe that was confusing, or somebody told us wrong back then.
Yeah, everybody got really hot about that for a second. Slowed everything down. Okay. So thank you for that clarification. Thanks for clarifying that, though.
No problem. It might also just be worth mentioning, as we were having this conversation about the inventory, that is not unique to us. That's something that is required in here as well. And actually, there's language in this application about asking if our survey and inventory systems and the data produced by them are coordinated and compatible with and capable of integrating with the state's survey and inventory system and its statewide comprehensive planning process. And I asked her about that. And she basically said, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Keep doing your inventory the way you're doing. But once you become a CLG, you'll get access to this state planning database and all of the data in it. And you can see the format that data is recorded in. And again, this is one of those provisional things. You know, over the course of 4 years or so, we'll kind of work to align our inventory with that state system so that we can submit the data to them and, you know, see the data from around the state.
Cool.
So just a little heads up on that on the inventory.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you all for your conscientiousness and contributions this evening. Really value your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there's nothing else, then we need a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your evenings, and we'll see you all on the 19th.
All right. Be safe.
Have a good night.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.